Good morning, Year 10. I hope you're well and having a lovely day. So for your do now, I would like you to write down 3 quotations from The Sorrow of True Love from memory. So I know it's been a while since we looked at the poem, but hopefully you've memorized 3 quotations from it and you can remember them. For at least one of these quotations, please could you do a quotation explosion to explore language and structure devices. So please pause the video for 5 minutes to do that now. Okay, so please could you write the date and the title of An Arundel Tomb, and also could you make sure you have the poem stuck into your book. So for the lesson you need a printout of the poem, a pencil for first thoughts and ideas, and different coloured pens or highlighters. So please take a moment to get yourself ready now. So An Arundel Tomb. What can we work out from the title? What do we associate with the words Arundel and tomb? And what kind of tone are we expecting from a poem with that title? So pause the video for a few minutes to jot down some ideas. Okay, so Arundel is a town in West Sussex with a medieval castle. A tomb is a large vault, typically an underground one, for burying the dead. In terms of the tone, maybe it might be something reflective, mournful, grieving, lost love perhaps. So make sure you've made a note of what's on the slide. Okay, so let's read it through together. An Arundel Tomb, first reading. Side by side, their faces blurred, the Earl and Countess lie in stone, their proper habits vaguely shown as jointed armour, stiffened pleat, and that faint hint of the absurd, the little dogs under their feet. Such plainness of the pre-baroque hardly involves the eye, until it meets his left-hand gauntlet, still clasped empty in the other, and one sees, with a sharp, tender shock, his hand was drawn, holding her hand. They would not think to lie so long. Such faithfulness in effigy was just a detail friends would see, a sculptor's sweet commissioned grace, thrown off in helping to prolong the Latin names around the base. They would not guess how early in their supine stationary voyage the air would change to soundless damage, turn the old tenantry away, how soon succeeding eyes begin to look, not read. Rigidly they persisted, linked through lengths and breadths of time. Snow fell, undated. Light each summer thronged the glass. A bright litter of bird calls strewed the same bone-riddled ground, and up the paths the endless altered people came, washing at their identity. Now, helpless in the hollow of the unmemorial age, a trough of smoke in slow suspended skins above their scrap of history, only an attitude remains. Time has transfigured them into untruth. The stone fidelity they hardly meant has come to be their final blazon and to prove our almost instinct almost true. What will survive of us is love. Give yourself time to read over the poem a couple more times, getting to grips with its content. It's okay not to understand every word or idea, you're just trying to get a feel for the poem. So what's the mood of the poem? Who's speaking? Who are they speaking to? And how do they feel? So pause the video for a few moments to jot down ideas answering those questions. Okay, so let's think about the speaker. And also notice the dogs at the feet, and that's mentioned in the poem. So the poem centres around a medieval tomb of the Earl and Countess of Arundel, which features effigies of the couple holding hands. The tomb is in Chichester Cathedral, and you can still visit it today. The speaker in the poem is somebody who has visited the tomb and is reflecting upon their experience, as well as the experience of the many other visitors who would have seen the tomb. He is prompted to consider what the couple might have been like, and whether they had any idea they would still be being talked about so many years later. The final line is often quoted to show the eternal nature of love, but Larkin's poem poses a skeptical question. Does love outlast life, or is this just a notion that people choose to believe? So this is definitely something interesting that you might want to consider. Is it something we just tell ourselves to give our lives more meaning? Or do you think it's true that love does continue beyond this world and this life? So that's something you may want to consider yourself. Okay, so the poem is about the perception of love and focuses specifically on the perception of an outsider. He doesn't even know the couple and is living many centuries after their death. Consider how some people now use social media to present an idea of their relationship to a wider audience. We might perceive their relationship to be a certain way because of details that they choose to post, but these are only small details, never the full picture of their true relationship. Now that you understand the speaker's situation and the tone, read it through again with a pencil in hand to annotate your ideas. What can you pick out about how those feelings are presented, and what devices does Larkin use to convey his feelings? On the second reading, don't forget to comment on form and structure, as well as the language used. Is there a regular rhyme scheme and meter? What do you notice about the punctuation? And how is the poem organised into stanzas? Pause the video now to jot down your own notes on the poem. This time I'm going to take you through the poem, mentioning key details you could annotate. On the third reading, you can add to your copy of the poem in pen, confirming your own pencil ideas and adding more to it as well. The poem has 7 6-line stanzas of mostly regular rhyme. It is written mostly in iambic pentameter, but this is broken in places, perhaps to exemplify how the couple, as a symbol of love through time, are not quite perfect and true. In places, enjambment is used, from one line to the next, and from one stanza to the next, perhaps mimicking the never-ending flow of time, or perhaps to signify the endless love of the couple and their infinite loyalty to each other. So remember, enjambment is flowing from one line to another or one stanza to another without any end stopping, so without any punctuation at the end of a line or stanza to form an end to it. Okay, so let's do some close analysis. Okay, so side by side, the little dogs. The first stanza gives details describing the tomb. Blurred and vaguely, due to time having weathered the detail of the stone sculpture. Habits refers to clothes. This section describes the sculptures, drawing attention to their rigidity through jointed and stiffened. The eye is involved when it sees the detail that the Earl, dressed as a knight, is not holding his sword as we might expect, but instead he holds his wife's hand. This kind of symbolises that it's not power or strength in the traditional sense that he valued, it's his love for his wife. This appears at first to be fairly typical of works of this time. Sharp, tender shock. Here we have an oxymoron, two things that appear to contradict, to heighten surprise and confusion. So tender shock. Tender refers to gentleness. Shock is quite sharp. So these things seem to conflict. So there's no knowledge of how long they would be there for. A detail for friends, or a choice to maintain their importance. So we've got ideas of loyalty and faithfulness throughout. Dogs represent this as well as people. So again, they are mentioned, the real couple now distanced from the image that this has created. Supine means lying on your back. And the old tenantry and the idea of look, not read, are also references to the changing congregation of the church. Services switched to being in English, not Latin. The difference between look and read. Reading would mean focusing on their names and ability. Instead, the focus is on their love. So we've got stanzaic enjambment from rigidly they at the end of the previous stanza, which emphasises the passing of time and the continuation of the tomb throughout many centuries. So one stanza flows into the next stanza. Weather, light, and nature are used to show seasons and change in this description of the graveyard. Endless altered indicates different people over time. Washing out identity is a metaphor, reminder of blurred, vague in the first stanza, and explaining the worn image. We now live in an unarmorial age, in contrast to the armorial age of knights, coats of armour, heraldry, etc. So, armorial refers to love. Sibilance of smoke in slow suspended skins above their scrap is used to illustrate the ephemeral nature of truth. So, ephemeral means passing quickly and then disappearing, not long lasting. We are grasping at it. It's like grasping onto smoke. Nothing physical is left, only an attitude remains. Then you've got alliteration of time has transfigured, emphasizing the change. Stone fidelity echoes faithfulness and effigy earlier in the poem, so you've got this continuation of loyalty. Even though they're now long dead, their loyalty to each other continues on even past their death. Blazon, display prominently or vividly. This word also has heraldic connotations associated with displaying the coat of arms. Almost instinct, almost true. It's not quite instinct, and we don't fully believe it. We want to believe it, perhaps. And you should consider why this idea is soothing or reassuring for us. So the idea that the love continues on. Okay, so make sure you've written down all the annotations on your poem. And as always, as well as annotating the poems, we're going to be capturing the key ideas in our exercise books. What you choose to record will be different for each of you, depending on what you feel confident writing about and would want to write about in the exam. Remember, what you write now may go on a flashcard to help you revise at a later date. Make sure your notes include reference to the speaker and their feelings or perspective, at least 3 quotations, literary terminology, points about language and structure, and consideration of key themes. Pause the video to do that now. Okay, so you're going to spend the last 5 minutes of the lesson making sure you know the quotes you've chosen really well. You can do this using any of the methods on the slide. So please pause the video for 5 minutes to learn your quotes. Okay, so that brings us to the end of today's lesson. Thank you very much for your hard work. I hope you found it interesting, and I'll see you in the next lesson.